Hello, and welcome to Making Known the Unknown. I'm your host, Tina Tarryk, and with me are my guests, Sidney Schwartz, school teacher from Hackensack, New Jersey, and also Bible researcher. Welcome, Sidney.
Hi, Tina.
Reverend Hewitt, medium, and co-founder of Gifts of the Spirit Church. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you.
On today's show, or I should say in this series of shows, we will be talking about various topics, all under the subtitle of Ignorance, the Mother of Devotion. And some of you might ask, what is ignorance, the mother of devotion? And what I'm going to do is turn that over to Carl Hewitt to give us a little bit of a background as to where that title came from and why we're going to be using that in the next series of shows. And before I do that, just a note to everyone here that our format is a little different from last season. Last season we had a half-hour show. It was educational in format, and we are hoping to use that series to set the foundation for upcoming series of shows. So this is really our second series. And in addition to that, this series will be a 1-hour live show. So after Reverend Hewitt goes into the explanation of the title of the series, what I will do is open up with a discussion on a particular topic, and then we will have that topic discussed for a little bit, and then we will open up the phone lines to all of you viewers so that you can give us your feedback, questions, thoughts on the topic that we'll be discussing today. So we hope you have fun, and we hope you call in. And with that, Reverend Hewitt, if you could elaborate a little bit on what does ignorance, the mother of devotion, mean?
Well, first of all, I'd like to go back a little bit and explain to the viewers. I'm sure there's probably someone there that did not hear or see our earlier programs. I have the gift of clairaudient, which means clear hearing. Also the gift of clairvoyance, which means clear-seeing. And these are the gifts of the Spirit as discussed in the book of Corinthians, chapter 12. And it says, "I shall not have you ignorant of the gifts of the Spirit." Whereas if you go in the Bible, and all through the Bible, you will read where it says, "And the voice of the Lord came to me." Well, in those days, if a person heard a voice and did not see the person that was speaking to them, it was out of respect that they would call that entity the Lord. So in my case, I don't use that term because I know better. Because the people that have passed on from this dimension, they're alive in another dimension. And we could probably go into that at another time. Some of it was discussed in the first series. Now, there is an entity that's with me, is one that I would call an ascended master. And he's the one that's been talking to me for a long, long time. At first, I did not accept him because I did not feel worthy of communicating with an entity of such high caliber. But he was the one that told me to call the first program, as you know, the first series of programs dealing with the unknown. You see, making known the unknown. Okay. And in this time, he wanted me to talk about ignorance, the mother of devotion. And he explained to me that down through the ages, there's been around 12,000 different religions on this planet. Many of them have passed on and others took their place. And all religions had their start from the government. The government did this only to keep the people in check. And then later on, when the churches found out that they had accumulated more money than the government had, they wanted a divorce from the government. And so that was when we look back, that was when the state and the church separated. Okay. You see, the divorce took place there. Now, he said that all religions had its start from ignorance. And he said ignorance, and so many people on the planet are really ignorant. I can't say that about Mr. Schwartz here because he got involved in studying this only to prove to his lady friend in college that this was all fraud and everything else like that. And I don't know of anybody that's ever crossed my path that has devoted so much time and effort in studying the beginning of religions and all of this. Well, from him coming from a Jewish background, he's accumulated more than anyone else I know of. I do have another student that is following on his heels, and he's also catching up very fast here. But when a person is ignorant, they're really opening the door to be misled by anyone who can shovel it faster than somebody else. So therefore, the words, ignorance is the mother of devotion, it sometimes causes people to be devoted to something they have never investigated. They're only taking somebody's word for it. I don't want anybody to take my words for what I'm teaching. I want the people to go out and do their homework, just like I did, just like Mr. Schwartz did. And in doing so, you will find out that truly ignorance is the mother of devotion, see?
See, if you think about devotion, people usually will do the same thing over and over again. I know when I was young, I used to go to the synagogue every week, and every week you said the same prayer over and over and over again. And because I didn't know any better, that seemed very comforting at the time. But when people have a better understanding of gifts of the Spirit and how it works, then you look at that and you see that that's just repetition. And if you think about it, if there were a God sitting out in the sky listening to the same thing over and over and over again, wouldn't he get bored and just turn it off and not listen?
Okay, now, so ignorance, when we talk about ignorance is bliss, this is maybe also something that you're touching upon. Where the assumption is that we all go around in our day-to-day lives assuming many things are what they are, but we don't investigate them. Is that what you're saying? We're just taking them on face value.
Or on faith, yes.
Or on faith.
Right.
More specifically, faith, I think is probably more appropriate for this series of shows.
Mr. Schwartz here, he at first was very angered, or he seemed to be angered because what I was teaching seemed to go absolutely against his orthodox teaching. And he set out to prove that there's no such thing, and all of this is a fraud and everything else. But yet, if a person would do some thinking for themselves, rather than to listen to somebody else, or rather than to follow someone else, just like sheep would follow the shepherd, and do the research, they will find that the word psychic means soul and mind, and everybody has a soul, and everybody has a mind, and to some extent, everyone is psychic, even though I hate that word because it's been tainted so badly. But I do want people to understand that another part of this program is very important, and I hope that the listeners and the viewers will be able to take this in. Everyone on this planet, I don't care who that person is, I don't care what you believe or what you don't believe, but everybody vibrates on a different frequency, just like everybody has a different personality. And it is important to know that because this is how I'm able to hear voices. For instance, when somebody calls on this phone, that person operates on a certain frequency, different than mine, different than yours, different than Sid's, different than anyone else. It is unique. And when that person is talking to me, it seems that the relatives or friends or people connected with the person, the caller, they are able to project to me. See, I'm a receiver now. They're the transmitter. And they transmit this information to me through the vibration of the person who's calling. And this can be complicated in some cases, but this is how it works.
Thank you for that.
Before, when I did radio and television, people wanted to know, there's one man who called in from somewhere, I think it was down south someplace, and he couldn't understand how I could sit in a studio here and pick up and describe where he lived, house, everything else, because he wanted to sell the place. Well, I had to describe to him what I was seeing in the vision, and he couldn't understand how I could sit in the studio and describe his house. And so this is how it works. It's not a miracle. Some people have this gift. They had it in the Bible. And Mr. Schwartz certainly could touch on that.
So you mean to tell me there's no such thing as miracles, and we all, at some level, perhaps if we choose to develop it, work on it, tune into it, are psychic, or I don't know if the same word applies, intuitive, or we all come in with the same package, and it's what we do with the package in this lifetime.
Yes.
Okay.
Miracles are simply psychic phenomena, and if you understand the science behind the phenomena, then it's no longer a miracle. It's not miraculous. It's psychic science. It's just like water freezes at 32 degrees. You know, you have the knowledge behind it, and you understand it, and that's the way it is with psychic science too. And once you have the knowledge of psychic science, you can go into the Bible and read it, and you discover all sorts of psychic events in there and understand what's going on. It's no more miraculous. It's psychic science.
Now that is going to tie in with the topic of this show, which I'd like to call beliefs versus knowledge. And I've recently discovered that there's a really large difference. And some of the people that I'll speak to will say very commonly on a regular basis, I believe in this, or you don't believe in that, so you must believe in this. And then yet I've taken it back or moved it on to another perspective and said to myself, well, beliefs can change depending upon people, just like different religions have different beliefs. But what is knowledge, and how is that connected to beliefs? And what's the difference? And what should we really be gravitating towards? Sticking with our beliefs or knowledge? And why do we care about knowledge? So I know I just threw out a whole bunch of things there, but whoever wants to jump in first, go right ahead.
To me, a belief is something that you kind of think is correct, and knowledge is where you had some sort of experience to prove the belief to you personally, so that you have firsthand knowledge of whatever takes place. And so therefore that knowledge kind of replaces the belief, because in belief you just believe it because they tell you to believe it, or you think it's right. But knowing this is when you've actually had an experience that will back that up, so that you absolutely know that this is true. That's the way I look at it. How about you?
I don't have a belief system. I used to. When I was a kid, I had one, but it was not a very strong one. And my system now is a knowingness system. I just know. I know those are bold words to say over this program, but it's the truth. I know that as we live here, we will live beyond this, because death comes to this body, it gives birth to that other body. Because the book itself says we're born with two bodies. We're born with a physical body that we see in the mirror. We're also born with a spiritual body. And these are the two bodies. And so just as the great teacher himself, Jesus said, you cannot go into this other dimension, a physical body of flesh and blood cannot go into this other dimension. It's your spirit body. So when death comes to, say, this body, it gives birth to the spirit body instantly. So there is no waiting around in some midway house or anything like that. There's no such thing as purgatory. That was all created. You go on living. My father came to me within 60 seconds after he died in North Carolina, and I was right here in Connecticut, and I was on my job working. He came to me. I heard his voice as clear as you're hearing my voice right now. He said, son, I have just passed over. And he says, I found out more things about you than I ever knew when I was alive. He came to me again, this time through another medium who was a trance medium, and he told me, named all of the people that was there waiting for him to pass into that kingdom. And he told me that they were waiting to tell him all about the only son he had that was born with the gift of the Spirit, which was me. And I'm the 11th child, and I was the eighth son.
See, mediumship can act as a catalyst to bring knowingness about. just as Reverend Hewitt said, his father came to him. He's clairvoyant and clairaudient. So he has the ability to speak with the people on the other side, and therefore he knows this. When a person goes to the medium, and let's say when I went for a reading with Carl, and my grandmother came through, she was able to tell him certain things about herself that he related to me, and I knew that he was in contact with her. Therefore, that starts creating knowingness in me. I no longer have to believe that. I've had the experience, and that's where the knowingness comes in. So mediumship provides the catalyst or the bridge between the two worlds, which takes you from a belief system into a knowingness system, because of your personal experiences that you gain through mediumship. Just like in the book, My First Encounter with an Angel, I was able to speak to my father who had died 2 years ago. I physically heard it through my own ears, through trumpet mediumship. Well, once I spoke to him, I knew he was there. Okay, and that's personal, again, personal knowledge. I know it now. I don't believe it. I actually experienced it.
So now, for most of us who aren't able to be clairaudient, or we're not clairvoyant, or we haven't had the opportunity to go to a seance or participate in one of those, one of the ways that we could have some of the answers that we need, perhaps, on some of the day-to-day things that we experience, or just the questions that we have, would be to go to someone who does have that gift or that ability.
But go to a genuine medium, and there's not as many genuine mediums on the planet as there should be. There's a lot of people that fake this, and I'm very, very much against that. I don't want to mislead anyone. I want them to know the truth, and when they know the truth, then they have a knowingness system. They don't have to worry about something they did. They think they did wrong. But no one ever did anything wrong. They did it for the experience of it. Now they own it. And there's ways of getting rid of that, because everything that we've ever learned is stored in the soul. The soul is like a computer, just like that computer, stored right there. The soul is right behind the breastbone, and the moment that the body dies, the soul leaves the body, coming out the top of the head, and it takes with it everything it's ever learned. It's stored in itself, even to the amount of hair on our head.
And how do you know this? How did that go from something you might have believed or been taught or told to something you know?
All the ascended masters that have met with me and taught me every question that I ever wanted, that I ever had, and some of them were ridiculous, I've always got answers from them, and it never varied one bit. They filled me in on everything, everything. One of the funerals that I did, whereas the husband and wife did not get along, they hated each other, and here was the man whose body was in the casket. He appeared right side of me here, and he told me to tell his wife to shut up, because she was crying and carrying on, and everybody in the room knew that they didn't get along, and they knew that she was putting on a front there. And he was as much alive as he ever was before, but he was now in his spirit body. And I saw him. I turned, and it was pretty hard for me to keep straight face, because, I'm not about to tell her, your husband says shut your mouth.
But see, if you go back into the Bible, this particular situation was described, because in the 21st chapter of the book of Leviticus, it specifically tells that the priests were not supposed to attend funerals, and they were not supposed to be near any dead bodies, simply because they didn't have the gifts of the Spirit. And the people understood that mediums, if they were at a funeral, would be able to communicate with the person that just went to the spirit world, and would be able to talk to them and tell their loved ones that yes, they passed over, without any problems. But because they couldn't do that, they passed this law that says they couldn't funerals, and to protect their secrets. If you watch the John Edgeworth's show, so many times the people are so comforted to know that their loved ones are okay on the other side.
Yes.
And if the whole key to this goes back to the Hebrew, because in the Hebrew word for priest is Kohen, And then technically that means a person with a familiar spirit. It's supposed to be a medium. Aaron was the first priest. He was clairaudient and clairvoyant, just like Moses was. So he was supposed to be able to do this, and this was why he was supposed to be a priest, because he was supposed to be the bridge between the two dimensions. But very shortly after Aaron, the priesthood, the Jewish priesthood, lost their gifts, and they weren't able to do this. But they found themselves in a position where they were living a good lifestyle and they didn't want to lose out economically, so they created all these laws and faked the mediumship and kept them. And this is why the priests and mediums have really been in conflict ever since. But when you understand all this, it becomes very clear.
Now, you just dropped a bombshell as well as Carl did a few minutes ago, and I'm trying to figure out which one of these I want to address first, but just the most recent one I'll start with. So priests really don't do any justice when they're at a funeral service or at a burial? Is that what you're saying? They really don't, or I should ask you, what is the belief that's holding them there, keeping them connected? If they're not speaking to God and they're not connected with any other source or higher being, what's the point?
Because people think that that's what they're supposed to do. Someone dies, you need somebody to say a prayer. You need the religious person who's supposed to be connected to quote God to say the prayer for the person, so they get to wherever they're supposed to be. When my father died, in the Jewish religion, you're supposed to say a prayer every day, twice a day, for the person who's departed. So I went to see the rabbi and I said, what is the purpose of saying this prayer? And he says, it takes a full year for the spirit to get to where they're going, and this prayer will make sure they get there. And I said to him, that's not, I didn't say it out loud to him, but I knew that the spirit people get to where they're going instantaneously. My father didn't even need to say a prayer every day to get to where he was going. He got there instantaneously, and he automatically went to the spot that he had gained for himself, that he created here in this lifetime. That's where he went in the spirit world. He was just on a higher frequency, which brings me back to something else that Reverend, you had mentioned. You asked how he went from how the ascended masters got him from believing something into knowing something. They have provided different experiences for him to get the first-hand knowledge. For example, when he says that the soul is in the breastbone and it records everything that you do, there was a time that he and I happened to be together, and he went off into a trance state, and they took his spirit into the spirit world, which can be done on a temporary basis, and they took him into the infrared zone, which is orange. And he went to a spot where they call it the Great Hospital. And as he described it to me, it was very much like Clockwork Orange. Everything was orange, and there were spirits lying about 3 inches, stacked up as if they would be in BJ's warehouse, all the way up to the ceiling for miles and miles and miles and miles. And the people were there because when they're on the earth plane, they belonged to the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church taught them that when you die, you will sleep with Jesus, and you will sleep until Jesus comes and wakes you up. And if somebody else comes to wake you up, it's the devil impersonating your family member or whatever. And he actually saw a woman come to see her mother, trying to wake her up and say, come on, there's lots to do here in the spirit world. And she raised her head, looked at the daughter, and just shook her head no and went back to sleep because she thought the daughter was the devil. He saw all this. He had that experience firsthand.
Experience for me.
So not only did that prove to him that the hospital does exist, but it proves that whatever you program into your soul, that knowledge is what you take into the spirit world. This is why Reverend Hewitt talks about the knowledge is your passport into forever, because it's what you know and it's recorded in your soul that will create your reality once you get to the spirit world. So if you've been taught that you're going to go to sleep, you'll go to sleep. If you're taught that there's a wonderful world out there and plenty of opportunities to continue to learn, that's what you'll do. So it's what you have here.
So in the New Age metaphysical world, when we talk about recording over the old tapes, so to speak, you're talking about the soul being a recorder, not the brain.
Right.
The brain doesn't have any function at all when we die,
right.
and so it's important that the knowledge stays in our soul. even if we started out this lifetime perhaps not really knowing a lot of this, and we were stuck in a lot of beliefs, we could still move towards gaining that knowledge and make a change. So we're not necessarily stuck. I guess is a comment and a question that I'm asking.
Well, you have to realize that people think that memory is stored in the brain, but it's really stored in the soul. The hard drive's in the soul.
Okay.
It's not in the brain cells. The brain cells access what's the memory that's recorded in the soul during your lifetime. And yes, as you gain new knowledge, okay, you'll have the old knowledge and you'll have the new knowledge, and people learn things and change their minds. In fact, when my father died, when my father was alive, he used to say, when I used to talk to him about anything about this work, he used to say, "It's nonsense. When you're dead, you're dead." Okay, so here we are at this trumpet seance, and Carl's sitting there. He whispers over to me. He says, "I see your father and his two brothers, and they're going from seance room to seance room, and they can't believe what's going on." Well, I knew that because my father never accepted any of this work. And he says, and he's shaking his head, saying, "This can't be, because my father wouldn't believe anything, according to this." And so when he finally came through the trumpet, and they told him to speak as if he was speaking on the telephone, and he spoke to me, I said to him towards the end of the conversation, I said, "Well, tell me, Dad." I said, Now that you've seen all this, do you still think when you're dead, you're dead?" And just like that, he says, some people have to live and learn, some people have to die to learn. So he was learning on the other side what he could have learned here.
And you knew that was your father because?
Because the way he spoke, his choice of words, his pronunciation, his everything about it was the way he said it. And the way he said hello was exactly the way he'd say hello in his physical life.
Some people believe that tampering with all of this is tampering with the devil or something evil, and it's not meant to be known. What do you think about that?
There's no such thing as the devil. That was created to control people's mind. That's all there was to it. There is no such thing as hell either. What kind of a God? Seriously. And I want everyone listening or watching this program, and the family that's visiting, family from Danielson that's visiting some people in Preston, you're watching this program right now. I want you to listen closely, because you're not going to learn a thing as long as you're talking, and I hear what you're saying. It's being told to me. Anyway, there's no such thing as hell. It was all created. There is no such thing as the devil. Now, look at it this way. Reason it out yourself. If God created heaven and earth and everything in between, why in the world did he create a competitor, which is called the devil? Why? And if God has the power to give us life and take it away, I ask you people to think about this. Why doesn't this God zap that blinkety blank? I won't use these words on this program, but boy, I use them in my church and I don't care. Why doesn't he zap that son of a gun and get rid of him once and for all? There is no such thing as the devil, people. There's no such thing as hell. This is why so many people feel they got to go to church every Sunday. They got to go there and they got to pray.
If you read your Bible carefully and read the 19th chapter of the book of Exodus, the Hebrews were brought to Mount Sinai, and God gave them the Ten Commandments. And he did it by talking to them directly. It was the one time where the physical Hebrew people, with their physical ears, could hear the voice of the Spirit, because the trumpet was used, just like the trumpet was used when I could hear my Father's voice. And the Spirit that was speaking through there went and told them all sorts of things that he wanted them to do. He wanted them to worship him. He wanted them to honor their father and mother, not to steal, not to covet, and not to murder, and so forth. Well, think about this. Why wasn't the 11th commandment, "Thou shalt be afraid of the devil, because he's out to get your soul and he wants you to burn in hell, and I don't"? Why didn't he talk about the devil? It was at one time in all of history he was talking directly to the people, and if that moral threat really existed, why didn't he say something at the time? He didn't say something at the time because it doesn't exist. And the devil wasn't created for another 500, 600 years. Out in the country of Iran through Zoroastrianism, where they had a good God and they had a bad God. They believed in dualism. And when the Hebrews came into that culture because of the Babylonian captivity in 586, when they were conquered and taken to Babylon, and they saw that there was a good God bad God, then they said, you know, that's not a bad idea, because before that time, God was in charge of both good and evil. Job talks about that. In the 10th chapter of Job, he tells his wife God does good and evil. In the Garden of Eden, it says that God made good and evil himself. It wasn't the devil and God, it was God himself. So this became a conflict for the Jewish people, because they wanted one God, and yet they said, you know, it'd be nice if God was all good, and what are we going to do with the evil? Because we can only have one God. Well, the Zoroastrians had a good God and a bad God. So they kind of, over time, came up with this idea of some fallen angel, but it really never took root in Judaism. But by the time Christianity came about, it got more established. So this is where this all came from. But this evil being was the people in charge, the priesthood, used that as an excuse to keep people away from mediumship, because mediumship was the one thing that it could expose the fact that they didn't have the gifts, and that they couldn't do what they were supposed to do. They couldn't be the intermediary between God and the people. In the 33rd chapter of Exodus, you can read where the people used to go to the meeting tent to ask God a question in verse 8. And they said, anyone who had a question to ask a God or had a dispute to settle, they'd go to the meeting tent and they would get an answer to their question. Well, the priests can't do that. The priests aren't the intermediaries, even though originally it was that way. So this is what this is all about.
Now, Sidney, you've researched this.
Yes.
And you found these answers.
Right.
You didn't just take something somebody told you and leave it at that. And before we continue on, I do want to ask about some of your travels around the world with both of you, and how far exactly you've gone to find out the truth, to gain knowledge about some of these situations. But I don't want to monopolize your attention myself. What I'd like to do now, if I could, is open up the phone lines to any viewers who would like to ask questions with respect to a specific belief that you have, and perhaps our experts here can explain maybe why that belief came to play, or why we have some of these seemingly strange beliefs without any foundation. The number to call into is 889-1728. And callers, if you call in, if you would please give your first name and tell me which of our guests you'd like to speak to. It's either Carl or Sidney. Then I will try to help you. Okay. So now I will continue and ask you about your travels throughout the world. According to your book, My First Encounter with an Angel, you have really circled the globe practically, and I wouldn't even know where to begin, but I'm going to throw out, let's see, what was one that really stands out in my mind? Probably Greece. I know you'd had a travel to Greece, and I guess what I should do is probably ask you, first of all, why did you go to Greece? What was the reason to even consider that whole trip? And whoever wants to start is welcome to.
Well, first of all, if anyone wants to go to the library and get the books on the history of Greece, they will find that there's a location in there, there's a place in there that was called Delphi. And there was a young woman, about 17 or 18, that was in a development class, similar to the development classes that I teach. And she developed to be an outstanding medium. And there's a great deal of written up about her and how famous she became, because there was a king that lived not too far from there, and he wanted a reading, but he didn't want to go to just anybody. He wanted somebody that was very good. And he sent two of his people, two of his staff members there, and he told them what to ask her. And when they went at noontime that day, and he sat in front, they sat in front of the medium, and they said, "We would like for you to tell us what our master is doing at this moment." And they did not know what he was going to be doing, but back at his mansion, he was in the kitchen putting a pig and a duck in a pot to boil for dinner. I mean, that's a little unusual, isn't it? And so they asked the medium what was the master doing, and she shook her head and she said, "This is very strange. I see him putting a duck and a pig in a pot to boil for dinner. And of course they thought that was crazy too. And in fact, they didn't know where to tell him when they got back home or not. But he kind of pushed the issue, and they finally told him, and he was very thrilled because that's exactly what he was doing. And so he arranged to go see her and had a reading. And of course he told all of the other families that were on his level, and she became very famous at the time. And this is, in those days, the person with the gift of the Spirit was called an oracle. The word medium has only been coined in the last 250 years. You want to add to that, sir?
So this is the Oracle at Delphi.
The Oracle at Delphi.
I can't say that I know much more than that, but the name rings a bell.
We went there. I wanted to go to Delphi. I wanted to go there perhaps to go into the altered state of consciousness and go back to that time, and I did. He has some pictures of that. I mean, he'd have to relate that to you.
The Oracle at Delphi turned out to become a school for mediums, and it lasted almost 1,000 years. It was finally destroyed in 391 when Theodosius did the Christian reform and got rid of all the, quote, pagan religions out of the Roman Empire, and that's when it came to an end. It existed close to 4,000 years.
So you went there with the sole purpose of going into a trance, or let's again step it back. Somebody or you had been told that you needed to go there to find some answers.
Well, there was questions that I did not have answered dealing with them, and the spirit people that talked to me, they said, take a trip there. And there was several times that we attempted to go, and one of the times the spirit people told me not to go because of the airplane being
hijacked. It was
hijacked.
Really?
And that airplane was hijacked. That was the TWA, I believe it was, where they murdered a man. Where was that?
Yeah. Someplace, I think, in Greece or someplace. I forget it now.
So we didn't go. There's been several times I was to take a plane and I was told not to go.
Now, what does history record the Oracle of Delphi as? What is the belief that most of us do have about this place?
The historians talked about the mediumship that went on there. And if you understand the psychic science, again, it's quite interesting because they had what they called the ateums, which was their cabinets. They sat behind a curtain, just as the way we spoke about Ethelpost Paris sitting behind the curtain. And so they followed a lot of the practices that many mediums did. The thing that the Oracle of Delphi is very famous, but there are many other oracles that were in Greece, such as the Oracle of Dodona, which was even older than the Oracle of Delphi, but not quite as well known. And that was in the northwest corner of Greece, all the way by the Albanian border. And we traveled up there. There were several different oracle sites that were in Greece.
Now, something just hit me. You mentioned a couple times different examples of places that people would go to experience this mediumship or participate in a seance, and you talked about a cabinet, you talked about curtains, you talked about enclosed areas.
Right.
Any connection to what we now know as a church? Is there any connection there? Did that come out of that? Or is that totally disassociated and it has nothing to do with what we do right now?
Well, when Christianity came about, they tried to imitate as much psychic science as they could, even though the priesthood wasn't mediums. But the people at the time understood mediumistic practices. So they would at the time, most worships, if you went to see the medium, you usually went out into the woods. The medium was sitting by a tree, and he would take a sheepskin or something and put over the front of him. The tree would be the back of him to make this cabinet, and you'd sit in front of the person in the cabinet and ask them a question, and you'd have this conversation, two-way conversation. So here comes the Christians, and they want to make a church, and they want people to come in and worship inside a building. Well, the people didn't want to go. So they decided, after they did this interview, they said, well, where's the medium going to be? Where's the cabinet going to be? So they decided, the Christians came up with the idea of, on top of their roof, to put this little kind of square little building on top. And they said the medium would be in there and that the people could sit underneath and they'd all hear the medium at once. And then they looked and they said, but where's the trumpet going to be? Because so many of the mediums use trumpets. So they put this cone on top of this little building that's on top of the roof, and that's why churches have steeples. And then they to come in, and that people started to come in at that point because they thought that this made sense. Another feature of a church would be the confessional booth. In the confessional booth, you have the priest on one side, the person on the other side, and there's a screen in between them, which would represent the curtain. And supposedly, you're telling your sins not to the priest, but directly to God. It's imitating the whole mediumistic process, except the priest isn't really in communication with anyone in the spirit world.
Sidney, explain the temple we went to at another trip when we went to Turkey. Whereas when we went into this temple, you have to take your shoes off, and then there's a cabinet way up at the top of a set of stairs. Explain that. We
were in Istanbul, and we were in a mosque, and apparently the worship service for the Islamic people are on Friday. That's the main one. And during that time, the imam, which is their priest, usually gives like a weekly sermon. And there's a staircase that goes for quite a ways up, and on top of there's like a little arch, and on top of that there's a cone, which represented the trumpet. And usually the imam walks halfway up the stairs in order to deliver his message, so he's like halfway between the spirit people and the regular people, acting as the bridge and the medium. Because don't forget, the one thing about Islam, they believe in mediumship because the person who established their religion was a prophet. They call him a prophet, Muhammad. And I'm sure that, as in with most religions, all religions were started by psychic phenomena through mediumship. You can go through pick any religion, and the founder was a medium. Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of the Christian Scientists, she was a medium. That's why there's Christian Science reading rooms, because after she died, they went into her records and they said, met with so and so in the reading room, and they thought it was a place to read books, but it was actually a place to have a psychic reading. So that was all misunderstood. There was a woman, her last name was White, and she started the Seventh-day Adventist. She was a medium. So many of the Christian churches started with mediumship. Jesus himself was a medium, although he didn't start a religion. Abraham was a medium, and supposedly he started Judaism.
How about Mary Baker Eddy?
Yeah, Mary Baker Eddy, yes, too.
Wait a minute. Jesus didn't start a religion.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Then why is his picture, his image everywhere?
That's because his followers has created a religion. Peter and Paul were the ones who more or less started a church. It wasn't Jesus himself. He specifically says in the 5th chapter of Matthew, in verse 17, I did not come to just abolish the prophets or to change anything. He didn't come to change a religion. He did come to teach, and his teachings were different than the religions of the time, because he was taking them 2 steps further in their quote belief system. But he didn't really come to start another religion.
He said to the people, he said, what you see me do, you can do it, even better things shall you do. He taught the gifts of the Spirit. This is what I teach. Everybody has this ability, and some people have it stronger than others.
But see, Jesus was killed before he could teach the sciences. He demonstrated all the gifts of the Spirit. That's what his miracles were all about. They were psychic phenomena. But he couldn't teach the people how it worked because he didn't have enough time. He only had 3 years, and they were very ignorant. They didn't have the scientific knowledge to understand half of it, but anyhow. So he demonstrated, and he was killed before he had a chance to teach the sciences. So when Saul was on the road to Damascus, who later became Paul, Jesus appeared to him because he knew he had the psychic ability, and he became the medium for Jesus from the spirit world to start teaching the sciences. And this is why Paul said, I want you to not to be ignorant of the gifts of the spirits. And in chapter 14 of the first book of Corinthians, he talks about how to run a seance. And in chapter 15, he talks about the 2 bodies. The philosophy started to become through because Jesus was teaching through quote, St. Paul.
Just a reminder that to our viewers, we are live, and if any of you have a question for either Reverend Hewitt or Sidney Schwartz, you're welcome to call. Our open line is 889-1728. Please provide your name and who you'd like to speak to, and I'd be happy to help. So now, churches really originate from mediumistic experiences or seances. But the last time I went into a church, we did nothing of the sort. Why?
If you read very, very closely in the Bible, it talks about, in the chapter 14 of the first book of Corinthians, it talks about the fact that how a seance is to be run, and that people who would prophesy, they would speak into tongues, and it would be okay for them, which is one of the gifts of the Spirit. Speaking in tongues simply means that the medium's spirit leaves their body, another spirit comes in, but that spirit speaks a different language. Okay, I don't speak French, but if I went into trance and I started speaking French, that would mean that a French-speaking spirit was in my body at that time speaking. It does no good unless somebody can translate the French. Okay, it's a wonderful demonstration of mediumship because it shows that you're providing information you have no way of knowing, but unless you understand what's being said, there's very little value in it, and it says that in the Bible, that you shouldn't do that. And basically, this happened in the first 200 years of Christianity. But in the 325, in the Council of Nicaea, that's when the church fathers decided that they wanted to take Christianity in another route, and they started to ban the mediumship out of it, and they stopped prophecy. And they actually sat down and declared that all prophecy had come to an end once Jesus had died, and that the prophecy no longer existed. But in truth, that wasn't true. That was just because they said so, and they wanted control of things, and because they wanted to control of the economic buildup of the church.
And Sidney, you researched that.
Yes.
I mean, you painstakingly, I'm assuming.
All this information is found in books, and usually, if you read the books that I'm writing, everything's footnoted. I'll tell you exactly where to find it. I can't always remember exactly where everything is found on the top of my head, but it's all found in books.
The one thing I'd like to add at this point in the program is this, and there's a lot of people out there, mostly the Catholics, they wonder why they do not allow women in the church or having anything to do with the service. Well, if you go back far enough, like this man, doing research, you'll find out that women, going all the way back to the beginning, are more sensitive, more intuitive than men. Therefore, women, way back there, were the prophets. They were the ones, they were the message bearers between the two dimensions. And the Catholic Church does not want the people to understand that. This is why they won't allow a woman. For instance, if you were in the church, you see, it's very possible, you're being a woman, being very sensitive, intuitive, it's very possible you might slide into a trance state and somebody else use your voice box and address all of these people that have come there for the service. You see? Now, they wouldn't allow that in the church. This is why they don't want to put a woman up there. It's all there is to it. We have checked this out. We've checked this out.
That seems to be such a shame, that there's a lot of knowledge out there that a lot of us could be part of or receive answers to questions with respect to. But you may have touched upon this a little bit. Why did mediums become phased out or no longer become part of what we call a religious service or a church? And now it appears we have priests who don't.
Because the priests wanted to control what the people believed. See, when you have a medium going on, you have a live dialogue with people in the other dimension. It's very much a dynamic thing. It's not rigid. It isn't set in stone, and it will constantly change and evolve. But the theologians wanted things. They wanted their dogmas written down, and they didn't want them to change afterwards, and they didn't want people to question what they said. So they actually killed off the mediums to silence the communication, so that no one would ever challenge them, because they don't want the people to think. They don't want people to have a knowingness system. They want them to have a belief system and to follow exactly what they say and do what they say and don't think about it.
I'm being told right now, clairaudiently, to explain to the viewers of this program that right down the highway here, down 32 in Montville, Uncasville actually, is that Uncasville?
Yes.
In Uncasville, Baptist Cemetery, there's a large stone there with several names of ministers on it that were burned at the stake. Hard to believe, you viewers out there? Hard to believe? These were mediums that were burned at the stake in this area. And I've traced this back. We cannot find one word. All of the records have been burned, they've been destroyed, so no one would be able to say, well, this church did it, or that church did it, or that church did it. But it's a Baptist cemetery.
It's the Union Cemetery on Route 32.
Yeah. It's right across from that little shopping center. I believe if you, from the street, and you look at the little shopping center, over to the right is Liberty Bank, and then there's these little stores, Pizza Hut there or something on the side. But right across the street, the cemetery is sort of on a hill. And if you enter that, the entrance, drive all the way as far as you can to the gate, to that iron fence, stop. Come right around your car to right there, and it would be a small, almost like a miniature statue of Washington, D.C. What is that?
Well, yeah, it's not quite a pillar, you know, an obelisk, but it has like an urn on top. It's pinkish marble.
Yeah.
I would say it's amazing that it's still standing.
Well, yes, because
that's amazing.
all records, everything has been destroyed. We can't find anything in the archives in Hartford or any of these churches around here because somebody has hid it. They don't want people in the area here to know that people were burned at the stake right in the area for being mediums.
What's the point, and what's the reason why other people need to, I'm going to say, oppress or control people? What was the reason, do you think, or that you found behind the priests? Okay.
Money.
Money.
Big business.
Wouldn't they stand to earn more money if they opened their minds
If they told
to
them the truth.
mediumship?
If they told them the truth, I would think so.
Okay. That's a heavy there.
I've spent an awful lot of my own money, my own earnings over the years to pay for things for Gifts of the Spirit Church, whereas the money was not coming in. I never asked anybody twice, you know, to pass the hat around twice. Never. I put the money in because I feel sorry for the people that were coming.
So you do have a church here
Yeah.
in Chesterfield, Connecticut,
Yeah.
as I understand.
25 years.
And so how is that church different than churches everywhere else?
We teach the gifts of the Spirit. We know that God is within ourselves, and we pray to that God within ourselves. And this is what I would like to teach everybody else to do, because that is when you contact the God, the true God.
So you will teach, if I came to your church, walked in the door, I would be learning about how to make a connection
Make a
with
connection.
the other dimension.
Don't look up.
Okay.
God is not up there. God is not, there's no such thing as a place out there, a real estate spot in the sky. It's here. Jesus said, and I'm sure you remember that,
Luke 21.
know that ye are gods.
And he said in Luke 21:17, the kingdom of God is within.
Yeah, that's where it is.
Just to remind our viewers that we are live, 889-1728. If those of you would dare ask a question about some of these very intriguing topics, to say the least, you're welcome to call and share your thoughts or your knowledge. We welcome that. And another question that had come to mind is, I just made a reference with my hand to the above, and I can tell you that that's a belief.
That is a belief.
And it was very unconscious that I did that.
I know
Something
that.
as simple as pointing to the sky.
Right.
Yet, on one level, through reading your book, My First Encounter with an Angel, and having met you, I know that not to be the case. But yet right then and there, it's a very simple example.
Automatically do that.
So there isn't any quote-unquote God in the sky.
No.
Or heaven.
It came from on high because simply, if we go back far enough, said it came from on high means a higher rate of vibration. In the beginning of this program, I was teaching about the different levels, higher vibration, and each one of us operate on a certain frequency, a certain vibration, different than anybody else's. A person that is very loving, very caring, a good person all the way through life, they're creating a vibration. They're creating that vibration, and when they die, their spirit body goes to that frequency. And it could be a very high frequency, not high in the sky, but a higher rate of vibration. And people today understand frequencies and vibrations more than they did when Jesus was on the earth plane.
Thank you. It looks like we're getting towards the end of the show, but we have a couple of callers on the line. Hello, caller. What's your name?
Lola.
I'm sorry?
Lola.
Hi, Lola. What question do you have, and who'd you like to speak to today?
They could both answer my question, probably.
Okay, go ahead.
Wondering what their opinion is on what happens to you after you die. I just started watching not too long ago.
Who died not too long ago? I'm sorry?
No, I just started watching not too long ago, so I was wondering what
Oh.
they feel happens after you die.
The question is, what do you feel happens after someone dies? And this is Lola on the line. I don't know who wants to take that question.
What happens when the person dies?
When you die.
You go immediately, you don't go anywhere to be judged or anything like that. That's all man-made stuff. You immediately go into the other dimension. Then and there. Back away from your television.
I know.
Thank
Okay,
you.
go ahead. You immediately go into the other dimension, the dimension that you prepared yourself while you lived on the earth plane. And I tell people, don't ever be afraid. You're not going to go to any such place they call hell.
Right.
There's no such thing.
Well, because I always felt that Earth is hell. Is that true? Do you believe that?
Earth
is
Earth
hell?
is hell.
Like,
She
this
feels
is
that.
the hell. Like,
Right.
here.
She's explaining that Earth is hell now.
Oh, many,
You bet your boots Earth is hell. If you want to see a devil, get out there on the highway. Go downtown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lola.
Thanks.
It's got a nice voice.
Hello, caller. What's your name? Okay. Go ahead, caller.
Sometimes in the past, I have found out that one caller will ask a question, whereas the second caller gets the answer to their question.
Right, and they might not need to speak. I think
Right.
we have one more caller. We're going to try. If you're there, caller, go right ahead. No, that's okay. Go ahead, caller.
Hello.
And your name is?
My name is Frank, and I'm interested in the Jewish religion. Now, I have heard rumors that in the Jewish religion, the woman has to sit on one side of the church, and the men have to sit on the other side. Is that true?
yes, that is true in the Orthodox branch of the Jewish religion. That's true, and supposedly the reason for that was that the men couldn't keep their minds on their prayers if they saw this pretty woman sitting next to them. So therefore, they hid the women away.
This is true, and I get such a kick out of
That's
that.
it. That's all there is to it.
That's all there is to it. But the Orthodox still do that, and they keep them behind a curtain.
I have heard different versions of it. I don't know if it's true or not.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Frank.
Okay.
Okay, take care. We're going to take one more caller. Go ahead, caller.
No more calls.
Okay. I guess that ends our show for today. We'll be wrapping up this series on beliefs versus knowledge, and we'll be continuing each week with a different topic. In Series 2, Ignorance is the Mother of Devotion, and we'll also be continuing with my guests, Reverend Hewitt and Sidney Schwartz. And thank you very much for joining us. Until next time.